The Israeli-occupied West Bank is an incredibly different experience depending on who you are. To try to give a sense of life in the West Bank, we did two separate bus trips, one with Israelis and one with Palestinians, from two adjacent communities to two other adjacent communities. There are a number of roads that are completely off limits to West Bank Palestinians and their cars. To differentiate who can drive where, cars have different colored license plates. They go along some of the same roads, and then on the outskirts of Jerusalem, they took very, very different paths. So the Israeli bus was able to take a right at a particular roundabout and go through an Israeli checkpoint and head into the city of Jerusalem, which is much, much more efficient. The Palestinian bus could not go that way, was not allowed to cross this particular checkpoint, and so had to take a left and begin a much longer meandering route around the outskirts of the city to get south of it. Israel occupied the West Bank during the 1967 Mideast War, and this road system has evolved since then, largely under Israeli control. The Israeli government for many decades has encouraged Israeli civilians to move to communities in the West Bank that we call settlements. Most of the world consider these illegal under international law, and they're sort of mixed up in between about 2.7 million Palestinians. There's one particular stretch of road that has had lots and lots of discussion, the East Jerusalem Ring Road, that our Palestinian bus actually drove on in its path. It is a large set of roads next to each other. The Palestinians are on one side of it. There's a large wall in the middle, and the Israeli registered cars are allowed to drive on the other side. Some of the Palestinian Authority and some human rights organizations have referred to roads like this as apartheid roads. The Israelis have responded that it's all about trying to maintain security. At some points during the journey, even though we're going through two major cities in the West Bank, we ended up going through village back roads, some of them so narrow that two cars could not actually pass each other. There's another point where the Palestinians have to drive through what is called the Valley of Fire. It's quite a nasty stretch of road. There's been lots of accidents there. And sitting at the top of this road, before you enter it, if you're heading south, is an Israeli military checkpoint that's known as the Container. And the Palestinians that we were riding with said that if they ever decide to close that for any reason, it basically paralyzes movement between the two halves of the West Bank for the Palestinians. The Container, which was the main checkpoint that we went through, is actually just one of many, many checkpoints that dot the West Bank. The experience of riding on a public Israeli bus is much, much different. They can ride on all of the main highways, which tend to be just a smoother ride. The Israeli route is about an hour faster, and this is significant because the Palestinian trip took about 3 hours. The Israeli authorities have long placed various restrictions on Palestinian movement in the West Bank, and these have gotten much more difficult for Palestinians since the Hamas attack on Israel last October. When we were on a stretch of shared roadway where there were Israeli registered cars and Palestinian cars using the same highway, there were Palestinian villages, towns along the side of the road, and almost all of them had these large metal gates, and they were all closed, meaning that people from those communities couldn't just drive their cars and get on the main highway. Overall, it's the Israeli military that controls the West Bank. They really have the ability to manage it how they see fit. What we really saw in these two trips was that there are separate and unequal roadways depending on who you are when you're trying to drive around the West Bank.